Hey guys, what's up? What an awesome interview this is. She says that I triggered her going into her art career, and I'm so happy that I did. Did not expect that credit. However, she is an amazing individual that has an incredible story, solid nuggets of wisdom and truth flows out of her, and she's just powerful experience, and I am so glad that I got the chance to be able to have the interview. I wanted to have her here in the studio. However, timing made that where I wasn't able to do it, so we did it on Zoom. So yeah, enjoy. Okay. Yeah. Canoe soon. Canoe soon. So much fun. Canoe. Yeah, canoe. Heard that?
Yes.
Okay. Hey,
Hi.
how's it going?
I'm in the middle of a little bit of demolition in the studio. I'm making space for another classroom and slash lecture space. And so I'm in my studio right now at the Kilburn Mills in New Bedford, Massachusetts. So it's another day, in the grind, being an artist. Very community oriented. So like the latest obsessions have been trying to make space available to have more things like figure drawing sessions, lectures for like business practice, for stuff like LLCs and DBAs and sole proprietorships, because there's not enough of that. So you caught me during a day of like trying to make space for more of those types of like activities to happen. How about you?
Exciting. Yeah. Getting all of this set up and working on behind the scenes class and business stuff for
Exciting.
foundation stuff. So yeah, your
It's
stuff
it's
is
like taking your
exciting.
vitamins. Yeah.
Huh?
It's like taking vitamins.
It's like taking vitamins. That's exactly right. This is Kat Knutson, everyone.
Everybody.
We met uh somewhere around summer 2008, I believe.
Yes.
Um right somewhere around there. And it was at Amelie's, I believe, was where we met, and you had some art out, and I loved your art. And so from there, I asked her to if she would like to show some of her art at a show that myself and Damian Blackheart, the Moral Misanthrope, were doing. And she said yes, and it was a wonderful experience for all of us. And from that point, I've watched her. I've had the pleasure of watching her uh, grow into exactly what she's doing now. Um, do you mind showing some of the background stuff
Yeah.
that you were talking about?
Yes. So this is my studio space right now. It's a bit cluttered on this side. This is the painting and the drawing classroom that I have. And we walk back this way. There's this back room that is in the process of, there's these two walls that are being demolished and taking those down to join them with this other side room right here to basically make another room exactly like this. So a lot of these things are going to be brought back here, and it's going to be another lab classroom, but also a lecture classroom for things like bits of art history, uh, entrepreneurs in the visual arts and design, also business, like folks that focus on like educating creatives to help them figure out how to understand the value of their time and materials. And so I've had this space for like,
I
it's
need that.
2023 now. So I've had this space for like 7 or 8 years. and it was a dormant space for a while, like a storage space. And so I just really took it upon myself to start making more community oriented activities happen. And I didn't know how to do it. I just went for it, and I'm learning as I go. And one of the biggest things I've learned is like surround yourself with people who are very similar in goals and also similar in drive, but different in their skill sets. And then make it also about fun as well as like deadlines. So I've learned a lot of cool stuff along the way. But one of the main reasons why I've gone in this direction is because I love being an artist, but what I love even more so is spending time with other creatives. And before I got into the business world, I realized, well, creatives, we obviously need to pay our bills, but we can't pay our bills if we don't have jobs. And there's not a lot of direct connection between the job market or the economy and the art education world, the art school world. And so that's why I went into the business direction. So this is just like a shell of a space now, but it's connected to other projects that I've done that are focused on like providing like job opportunities for recent graduates in fine art programs and graphic design programs. Um, and I've got, when I was a kid, I remember folks telling my parents that I was probably on the ADD spectrum of some sort. And so I've always loved taking varieties of things and finding ways to overlap them. So this is like taking that obsession of like love for making art, love for being around others who were very creative or productive, and then figuring out ways to keep those relationships alive and vivacious. And business does that. But then creatives aren't necessarily business oriented. Business folks aren't necessarily creative oriented. So being like more matchmaker, I love trying to build
Yeah,
bridges between the two worlds.
it's a beautiful thing. Yeah, no, that's very cool. And I love that. That's my experience has been a lot of that as well. Just growing up and what that looks like. I know for me, I made a lot of emotional choices, growing up that weren't the best for me, and uh, moved me in into spirals a lot of times, spiraling down, not understanding how to be connected. And you mentioned something, and for me, it's in general, like any mental health sort of thing. I feel like a lot of creatives fit that description, and essentially is why I'm doing what I'm doing now, which is finding the people that for me are my personal celebrities, and they have their own local celebrity, and or whatever. In that respect, they have that celebrity, but my personal celebrities as well, people that I look up to and see doing things like you're doing right now. So thank you for sharing that stuff too. That's awesome. It's so cool to see um uh, any kind of creative space. And
Yeah.
I love that you're sticking with your guns when it comes to working with community. So we're going to get into essentially all the things. We're going to go all the way back into the beginning part where like and get to know you in this. So what you start where you're comfortable with. I would never ask anybody to share something they're not comfortable with sharing. However, um, even if it's just dealing with the emotions, what is your rock bottom? And, you know, from that place, you know, what was it like? You got some of the messages that I sent you to preface for
Yes.
you. However, you know, for the audience, you growing up as a child, and or in your early, in your 20s,
Yes.
whatever it is, Um, would you like to share that with us?
Yeah, I would love
Okay.
to.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's see, I'm 38 now. I was born in Austin, Texas. My family moved from Austin to North Carolina when I was 9 years old. The biggest thing I experienced in that shift was it was very religious, like going from a Catholic background to a Pentecostal background. My mother was very religious. And one of the things I remember experiencing traumatically was this idea of, as a woman, you shouldn't be seen or heard. You need to be sweet, stay sweet. And I struggled with that. That was one factor that always like bothered me as a kid. Like I would be someone who was outspoken, or I would say something that's maybe kind of snarky, or I would ask questions. I was that annoying kid that said, why? How come? I didn't just believe what was presented to me. I always wanted to understand how the world works and why it is that way. And I remember being really challenged emotionally with that concept of like, be quiet, just be useful, domestic, all of that. So I've always fought against that. And I've always been more of a tomboy. Another thing, I came from a family that's kind of like, on my mom's side, there's the native Latinos and then the Spaniards. There's a little bit of Irish in there, but it's like the Spaniard blood. I like to jokingly call it like the El Conquistadors. So there's the Catholics, and they had they didn't quite get along with the native indigenous folks, right? They had the whole like the what do you call them, the El Conquistadors, like. And then on my father's side, his family is Native Alaskan, and his mother is like very, I wouldn't be surprised if not directly connected to the Mayflower. So there was that bit of alienation. So I witnessed in my family growing up bits of verbal and physical abuse, but not from a state of unloving or hate. It was watching my parents like not receive the right information of how to communicate with children in a way that accepts children as they are. It was more so always looking at us like something's wrong with us. And rather than communicating that efficiently, they didn't have those tools. So there were bits of abuse that came in. And I'm already healed from that. I'm already over that. I get along with both of my parents. I love them very much. And so the thing that helped me heal from that was trying to understand why they did what they did. And what I learned was their background, like they had lots of trauma in their background growing up, whether it was from alcoholism, abuse, early death, you know, of their parents.
Mutilation.
And so I was growing up, with the tumultuousness of not having like a super solid connection to my parents. And so I was confused a lot about how the world worked. I had some structure growing up in the church, being told what I was supposed to do, the whole morality stuff of like, only say nice things, only always be polite. Men always have the answers, don't question authority. But I didn't like that because it didn't seem stable. Men obviously weren't always correct 100% of the time. And that plus I had brain cancer as a kid. I was a freshman in high school. And so when that happened to me, that was a pretty interesting rock bottom. I think I say interesting because it was actually kind of in hindsight a comforting thing because I knew for a fact something was wrong with me and there was a solution that was being done about it. It was different from growing up in the trauma situation where you knew something was up, but there was nothing to really identify what was going on. So you were kind of in your head saying, like, I think something's wrong. I think, but so there was a lot of alienation from societal norms. Like I didn't really have a lot of typical experiences growing up, like that other kids had. I was always in a hyper vigilant state of like, when is the next like episode going to happen? Like I had to always be on my toes. So it developed this part in me that was always looking for something like to fall out, whether something's going to happen or not. So that was like my kind of rock bottom. And the reason that's a rock bottom is because if you have that type of mindset and you don't heal from that, you're going to always think something's wrong. And that affects me in my relationships to this day. I always have to be mindful. And when I think somebody's upset, they may not actually be upset. And if they are upset, they're not necessarily upset at me. And so it takes a ton of energy to like witness that in yourself and then try to do the work to be like, wait, hold on, back up. There's nothing actually wrong because our actions are determined by how we process things. And the way that we process things, there's things like the four agreements: don't take things personally, do your best, show up on time, which I think are so helpful. Like they come from a state of operating in logic, whereas like being hypervigilant is much more on the emotional side. And I've seen members in my family make choices that were more from the state of hypervigilance that created ripple effects that were not so productive, we'll say. And so what I do today is coming from kind of like breaking down and assessing my experience as a child and like early teenager and saying, okay, this is the information you have. And then I started to do a lot of like comparing to the world, like, okay, the world of patriarchy, for example. I looked at that aggressively, and what I learned was, well, both men and women are oppressed, right? Women are obviously oppressed. The world of feminism, like, talked about that, but men are also oppressed as far as they're always expected to have the answers. They're expected to be strong, not allowed to be emotional, and they're supposed to be this extremely independent, like, which is it's another type of oppression, because if you put any sort of expectation like that on anybody, they're going to break. And then when they break and they become emotional and they're not allowed to be, they're going to get violent. And so like looking at that, that was a way for me to see like, oh my gosh, like there's communication barrier. I then looked really heavily at how the church is designed, because I experienced the Catholic Church, Pentecostal church, the Baptism church, the Presbyterian church. And I was like, it's a business. It's a concept that uses literature in the Bible, which is actually really cool literature that helps humans. Like humans are like a machine, like an
Mhm.
organic computer. And you've got literature in the Bible that talks about how to be a very efficient human machine. I say machine because we're in the day and age of AI now. And so
Mhm.
I looked at how the church is like designed as a business, like, and I'm not talking about the faith, I'm not talking about the concepts it teaches around Jesus or anything, but I noticed how there was a lot of shame and a lot of fear that was put through the messages that kept people in a state like myself, in a state of like mental comatosis of like, don't ask questions, don't question authority. You're doing something wrong all the time. Somebody's looking at you. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I thought that that mindset was really interesting because it's a really great way to keep people at bay. Another machine I looked at was the
Mhm.
commodification world. In order to make people buy, they have to be in a certain state of mindset that makes them feel like they're not enough. So you've got like these two types of forces that are always coming towards us. One, you're never good enough, fear, shame on you. And the other one, you're too fat, too ugly, not popular enough, not wearing the right things. And I was like, oh my God, this is like a way to keep people in a permanent state of like standstill. Like they feel like they're moving and they're making progress. The moment they make progress, though, they second guess themselves, they stop, and they might retract backwards. So it's this
Mhm.
back and forth, back and forth. So I used my rock bottom experiences to ask questions of like, why is this the way it is? So
Mhm.
I went to school initially to just be a nurse because I was told it was a good idea. I was like a zombie. And when I say zombie, I mean like not asking questions, just working on autopilot, doing as I'm told, not looking at what's going on around me, just moving forward, which I see a lot of students. I see how the education system kind of does that to a lot of young minds, especially minds that don't have access to mentorship, right? Um, but I went to school initially for nursing and I hated it. I saw how the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies were basically making bank on people being ill. I didn't want to be a part of that. I had like an early life meltdown. That's about the time that you and I met. I was 20, in my 20s already at this point, and I found this really cool art department at a junior college in North Carolina, Central Piedmont Community College. I met artists like Elizabeth Ross, Edward Burnham, um, gosh, I'm trying to think of them, Peggy Rivers, and they shined this really cool light in my life. They said, if you like something, you can go after it and you can get better at it, and you can also kind of have fun along the way. I think if I had had that type of teacher in the chemistry department, in a math department, I would have gone in those directions. But I
Gotcha.
had those experiences from art teachers, and so I went in the art direction thinking the art was had all the answers.
Mhm.
And that trauma followed me because I was like still asking questions of why does art have the answer? So I went straight for my MFA after I made that decision, like less than 5 years later, I graduated. Then I got a job teaching at a junior college, and I've been
You
teaching there
blazed a
for,
trail. Like it was
I was
unbelievable to
like,
watch. You really did. Yeah.
well, time was wasting. I was already in my mid 20s. I knew that people in my I had this expectation on me, like, do like, I always felt like I was behind, I felt like I was missing steps. I felt like my peers were ahead of me. I hadn't done the self work yet to not look at others. You're not supposed to compare yourself to others, but I hadn't gotten there yet. I was still in this mindset of you're behind and you need to do all this catch up work. So I just made it a point. My true north was get your MFA, go be a professor. I didn't have any guidance in that. I would not recommend that to anybody to do that because the state of the higher education right now, if you just go the MFA route without having a business background, which I hope we'll get a chance to talk about, it's dangerous to just go in that direction without asking questions. But being the first in my family to go to college, I was walking blind the whole way. The only thing I had was like I had my stubbornness to ask questions of like, I think this is a good idea. And I had like persistence to just move forward. I was engaged once. I broke out from that. I moved away from Charlotte to Asheville for undergrad, then moved up to Massachusetts. Like, I was not afraid of losing relationships. I was not afraid of I got disowned by my family once in the process. They were like, this is not a good idea. And I was like, I'm going to finish this. And they were also very supportive. Like once they saw how serious I was, they then became very supportive of the fact, which I'm really grateful for. Um, but it was like, okay, I'm going to finish this because it's important when you start something to try to finish it, at least to me, because then you see like the full circle of like consequence. You see the full circle of how things are connected. And that's still not seeing a lot. Like things are more spherical. They're not linear, like full circle. Like there's all these other dynamics that are involved with stuff. But yeah, I was like, I'm going to go in this direction. I'm going to go into education and I want to help others see what they're capable of. That's why I chose that because I was coming from a space of not knowing what I was capable of. I was breaking away from a mindset of being told what I was supposed to do, by different institutions, by different mindsets. So I was in the process of breaking out of a mold and it was amazing. And I was like,
Hmm.
I want to help others do this
You want to
because
be able to give it away.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's so like it's isolating. It's so like one of the things
Yeah.
that drives me nuts about the way the current economy works, capitalistic ways, is it still runs under this mindset of king of the mountain. And king of the
Yeah.
mountain is like very isolating. And I see it. I see people like isolate in themselves. They get kind of scared of engaging, right? Um, and so I wanted to have others to engage with and that's where the homilies thing started, right? I started noticing a lot of magic in the coffee houses and the
Hmm.
cafes. At the same time, I had just started art school and I learned about the salon atmosphere that was going on in the mid to late 1800s. The golden age of illustration was coming around. The camera had just been invented. You had graphic designers like Lautrec and painters like Degas. You had drama, you had writers, but there were people who had minds who thought about things. They asked questions and they didn't just follow, what was presented in front of them. And there's other examples throughout history of like creatives doing this. And what I think is interesting about creatives, you've got the creatives that are the professionals, like Michelangelo, who worked with the Sistine Chapel, and you got Rembrandt, who worked for the merchant class as like the the Dutch tulip, I think, was rising in currency. So you've got the professionals, but you also had like the political activists, the social like engagers and whatnot. And I was extremely drawn to that because that to me felt like freedom. And also like it reminded me of dynamics that you see in the church. Like the church creates community, it creates connection, it creates clarity, it adds closure, comfort, but it comes with this idea that in order to belong, there's something you need to be ashamed about. You need to keep your head low. Do not ask questions. There's authority figures. And again, I'm not talking about the concepts that the church talks about. I'm not talking about like Jesus. I'm talking about like the Catholic Church is set up in a way where you're always living in shame,
It's
right?
a hierarchical situation. So you're getting
Yeah.
your directions.
Yes.
from someone else who knows better
Yes.
versus having an individual intimate relationship with the
Yes.
universe. Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I loved like growing up in the church. I loved that dynamic of community that was there. So when I
Right.
was
Right.
into the art scene
Me too.
and I
Yeah.
started seeing community, I was like, this is the same thing, but it manifests in different
Yeah.
ways. And there's poison on both sides. For example,
Sure.
like I'm in the music scene now, and the music scene is very active in different types of venues, like bars, which have other sorts of problems like alcoholism. Um, you've got like dangerous predatory things that happen in those types of settings. But besides those dangers, there's this sense of community that happens in the live music scene. So it's
Mhm.
like both sides of the aisle have their dangers about them, but nonetheless, there was something of a creative um, string that connected the two, right? And so I chased that, and I've been teaching at the junior college I've been at for about 10 years, and I started to notice something. I was teaching students ideas about, how to draw, how to design, how to animate, how to paint. But then they would ask me these questions. Well, what do I do with this? How do I get a job with this? And guess what was coming out of my mouth? Oh my God, I didn't realize it was there until they started asking these questions. Well, I became a professor. And I was like, wait a minute, that's what I was told and that's what I did. I can't teach all my students to do that. One, there's not enough
Right.
jobs. Two, that's like the snake eating its tail.
Yeah.
Three, the educational institution is a commodity that's being sold. And the marketing idea is your life will be better if you purchase this degree. So I
Mm.
had another like mini like meltdown, like not midlife crisis, not huge, but just like okay, we need to do better. So I started learning about the basics of business. I opened a business 2 years ago. I hire students as subcontractors. I get projects. I've learned all sorts of things from like general liability and workman's comp, like subcontractors versus employees, different types of 1099s that go out there, how to manage different spreadsheets, understanding all the different overhead costs, none of what was discussed in art school. And I'll go down this little tangent really quickly.
Right.
My alma mater is shutting down their main like campus because they didn't have a high enough enrollment, and the university saw them as basically excess waste. They weren't making the revenue, and the way that the country is operating right now in this very capitalistic, like bottom line nature, art's not necessarily appreciated art for the sake of art, and so artists have to kind of double time their efforts to not only be good at what they create, but also be good at showing the world what they're able to deliver service wise or product wise. None of that is being discussed at length at the universities. And so you see their enrollment numbers dropping because you see students not wanting to spend tens of thousands of dollars or $100,000 on an education that they'll have a hard time getting out from underneath. I had a faculty member yesterday tell me she's never going to talk to me again because I'm openly talking about this online. They were not very happy about that. So that kind of stems back to my childhood, like trauma. I was always asking questions, how come things are the way they are? But
Mhm.
the trauma was being told to be quiet, sit down, or physically being like dealt with, So I always had issues with like confrontation. I had issues with I'm worried about making somebody upset if I say something. So I might try to be overly polite. And if somebody's talking at me in a disrespectful way, rather than immediately standing up for myself, I'll think, what did I say to disappoint you? I'm so sorry. So like there's what that's where my kind of like work is going right now. Like learning how to like truly understand like okay you were not an asshole just now you were blunt maybe and you said things very clearly you can apologize if you said them in a rude way but like I don't know if what they're doing is right so that's the
Yeah.
kind of like the work that I'm starting to get into doing right now as far as the self work goes.
I'm going to jump in and say we teach our children to question authority in social settings.
Yes.
Like it's okay to question authority when you're on a recreational situation. You know, like just for example, if we went to kayaking and it was recreational, and then so the the person who is with us to show us how to kayak safely or whatever, we question them. And if we disagree, we're allowed to disagree. And everybody sort of is in a light, relaxed mood. But the minute you start to question authority in the scenario where it's a professional setting and you're receiving a paycheck and that person is in line with your actions and attitudes within that paycheck scenario, you're taught not we are taught and we teach our children not to question that authority if we want to continue that paycheck. And so
Yes.
then you'll have the
Which I
scenario. Go ahead.
I understand that structurally. I
Mm-hmm.
understand the what they're where they're coming from, but you should be able to ask questions and there should be able to be a dialogue.
I
If
agree.
any dialogue is shut down, it puts the system in danger
Yeah,
because let's say
absolutely.
there's new information and let's say that new information is going to help make the system more efficient, then that's really helpful. There could be like small systems created for feedback loops, and the
Mm-hmm.
feedback loops could help reflect on how things are running. Now, bureaucracy and administration can get tangled, especially if the administration is not connected to what's happening boots on the ground wise.
Right.
And so if somebody's in a position where they're giving feedback from a boots on the ground point of view, because they're like, this is not working, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't have maybe the language to speak to admin, right? Let's say admin's using a totally different jargon, that's
Mm-hmm.
going to create a problem right there. So to simplify it, if they think it's better to just tell people to not ask questions, then yeah, it's going to simplify an aspect of cutting down on their like communication they're having to process, but they're shoving a lot of stuff under the rug and they don't realize that. And that's what we're
Yeah.
actually kind of witnessing right now at the school, that they shut down one of their main campuses. And there was a back and forth going on saying, it costs too much money to upkeep the building. The building owner was willing to sell the building to the school for $1, but the school thought that it would take too much to bring that school up or bring the building like up to code. So they ended up just last minute before the semester start shutting down the campus, and then they rented a random like strip mall building, and they didn't even have the permits in place to do the work, so they're going to have to spend more money now to renovate that and the students are out of the classroom. So now there's some students who are talking about suing to get their money back because they don't have a place to go that they just paid tuition for. So it's a classic example of
Right.
somebody asking questions but not being listened to, you know people being quiet, staying quiet because they're worried about getting in trouble. And then you see this aftermath happen. So there's also the flip side of it. Like if somebody puts a bunch of noise out there, but they don't do the research to put the information out there, it's
Mm-hmm.
just emotive noise, then that's going to get shut down because the only information that's going to come from that is so and so is not happy. It's like, okay,
Yeah,
why are you not happy? We need more information. We need both that logic and that intuition, both. And that's what makes me
I
kind of go
agree.
back to what I was talking about earlier, where I feel like men and women have kind of been separated in our society
Mm-hmm.
outside of like, as far as the way the culture, like a lot of like creatives and like folks that are like have more self-actualization don't operate this way, but like in general I feel like women and men have been discouraged from engaging with each other outside of like marital institutions or relationship institutions. We've got industries designed to like get women and men to only understand each other in the Mars and Venus way or in the romantic way, but there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of really different strengths that come from both on the intellect side, on the
Right.
intuitive side, and there's a range, there's a whole spectrum of like how people operate. Like men have amazing intuition capability, women have amazing logic and systems designs capability, and you put them together and you have a much better outcome. But I feel like this might be like trailing off a bit, but there's very much this like left or right, this or that,
Mm-hmm.
one or zero. And
Mm-hmm.
it makes for a simpler system design doing that, but it leaves out a lot of really important bits of information. And people, by being discouraged to not give feedback, to not respond, to not ask questions, it keeps things going as they are. It kicks the can down the road,
Hmm.
right? And so I think
Yep.
it's imperative. That's what made me go in the direction I went into with community. It's imperative to get more people involved in conversation, ask them their experience, look at what their strengths are, look at what their prerogatives are, why their prerogatives are, where they're coming from, and then looking at that as a whole. And a really big challenge is operating in this like capitalistic dynamic where business is for the sake of bottom line. That creates a lot of barriers. But at the same time, what if we found a way to work around that kind of a structure to create a more sense of order in all the different types of feedback that are coming in, right? There's a
Right.
guy in our town, his name's Adam Katz. He opened up this restaurant arcade called Play, and it's turning into this small epicenter, like culturally in the town, because he's extremely community engaging. He's extremely open and flexible with the staff that he works with. He's very mindful about how he's a part of the community around him and not just about a business in a location that's trying to collect a bunch of revenue and he's removed from the community in that way. And he's doing really really well because of that. And I think it's a great example of like mixing both aspects of like intuition and logic, bits of like business structure and also community engaging structure that's beyond the bottom line in a way. So I'll put a period right there because like I went in a lot of different directions.
No,
Hope that
that's
I
great.
stayed on track.
No, that's awesome. That too. I'm glad you shared it, and I feel like that's truly what's important. And I do believe in a general way that's where our society is going, regardless of you know quote unquote economy and business and all of that stuff. Uh, People are going to do. It was like Tony said this a while back when we were talking about everything, and he said even when the Empire of Rome fell, people still did. Rome is still there. People still did things. Like people still lived, people still farmed, people still, so if there's some sort of collapse or whatever when it comes to our society in that way, we're still going to figure the stuff out. And I think a lot of ways, a lot of people are. And I'm happy to be a part of it, that workaround that you're talking about. And that also is going to segue me into essentially what happened and what it's like now.
When I had cancer, the one thing I got from that was, and I had asthma, I had pneumonia a couple of times as a kid, so I had this weird blessing of experiencing near death multiple times. So there was something in me that just didn't give a damn about going for it. As far as like I wanted to go for it. I was like, you get
Mhm.
what one shot. Like if we get reincarnated, I don't know. If we're gone and like I don't know, nobody knows. But I do know that we have time. We were given time on this planet. So go for it and get as much done as you possibly can with that time. So that's where that energy came from. The second one was every time I asked questions and got a little bit of information, I realized this factor of not being alone was like, it's not just me. And there's this, I think dopamine hit is an understatement, but every time I realized it wasn't just me, it gave me more momentum. It added to the inertia of wanting to keep going. For example, you met the guys that were walking by the camera earlier to help with the studio. Both of them, one of them's a carpenter. Another one, him and his wife own this amazing shop upstairs, and they have amazing skill sets and they have different goals. And a lot of the goals that they're going in overlap with my goals in some way, right? And so, this one concept I learned about earlier in life called alchemy, it was seen as this esoteric concept of like taking things unrelated and making something greater than them. Well, something like in the Bible, they talk about where two or more are gathered, I am there. Like two minds come together and you get something even bigger and even grander, you know? So that mix, putting those ideas together, it made me realize when you work with others, this magic starts to happen. And when they're on the same page as you, it just, it adds a warp speed to things, and it adds a warp speed like dimensionally, like there's overlapping interests, there's overlapping strengths, and then you start to put these goals together that people are on the same page about, and they attack them for different reasons, for their own reasons. So you find this like harmony, and then magic starts to happen. There's also the unknown, like you'll do a project with somebody and you're not exactly sure how it's going to turn out. But as you're working on that project, you're going to get this really interesting set of outcomes that's more information that then can help you figure out what you can do in a different direction for another thing that you're working on. So it's this endless amount of enthusiasm of knowing that I'm going to learn something that's going to help me push one thing further, or help me help somebody else push one thing further, right? I also learned, like in the whole community sense, that the fact that everybody has different agendas and different strengths, we're not always playing the same part. Like one moment you'll be maybe in the center of something, like a leader, like man behind the green curtain, Oz, and another moment you're like one of the workers on the ground lifting heavy stuff for somebody else, and in another moment you might be like some sort of a usher helping transition from one part of a moment event to another. So we play different roles, and there's this, like, it goes back to that sense of community, man. Like when you help somebody else bring their vision to life and they see that, they then get ecstatic about wanting to help you bring your vision to life. And then there's a lot of work that goes into finding those people. You got to do a lot of stuff, learn a lot of stuff. Like one of the big lessons I learned was there's a difference between consumer and business owner. Someone who's only a consumer doesn't understand the cost to make something available for consumption. So you'll have Karens out there that don't quite understand what it took to make something happen. So they'll only gripe, right? Now that's different from the connoisseur. The connoisseur like takes something in, consumes something, experiences something, and they give feedback on that. That's different than the consumer. And so, whereas the business owner, they're looking at all these different factors that need to be in accord with each other in order for something to operate smoothly. And they usually have a specialty in only a certain slice of those factors. And they work with others to help them figure out the rest of the pie chart in a way. So they're very community oriented, right? And so seeing these things was like a drug. It was like, if you engage more, you learn more and you do more. Now, there's these pitfalls. There's things like being jaded. There's things like if something doesn't work and you just give up. There's working with people who have felt misunderstood, who were mistreated, who were they didn't have all the wherewithal to do something and they're dealing with failing, or they're trying to come back. Like there's all these other minefields that you have to deal with. But guess what? You're not alone. Others are also. So then those minefields become like alchemical opportunities to like figure out how to like not only like process something, but use like the crap that happened, the aftermath, to do the next thing. Usually it's like a potential like mini renaissance around the corner. It's like this didn't work, and this sucks over here. But from all this, now we know this and we want this. So if we know this, then we'll do this. And, which is actually a lot more interesting than if something's going steady. If something's going steady, it's actually relaxing because it's like things are working. They're actually working for a chance. Like that's got a great like benefit to it as well. But all these things, they're extremely like they're like taking a jolt of energy. Like the guys that are in the space right now knocking walls down, and I'm going to be in there helping them as soon as I'm done with this interview. There's going to be really cool events that are going to happen in there that are going to bring like minds together, and those minds are wanting to do stuff. So they're going to help get some tools for their things, and they're going to go out. So it's like being a dandelion space, and they're like sending out all those different seeds, right? This space that I'm in right now, this is called the Kilburn Mills. The guys that own this space, they believe in community enrichment via business. So they offer the spaces for a lot of small business owners and a lot of artists, and they're aware of like the different budgets people are working on, and they try to help create marketing campaigns to promote what they're trying to do and also what the businesses are trying to do. So there's like really cool dynamics happening here. New Bedford, which is seen as this city that a lot of people don't find really interesting because it has like a bit of a violent past with drugs and addiction, but there's people who are using the space and creating these really beautiful like green spaces, really beautiful like tourist type spots. Like they're worried about gentrification happening. Boston's bringing a train directly to the city because they're like, oh, sweet spot potential, right? So it's looking at all those dynamics and then like seeing where do you want to play? It's a playground, and it's a
Hmm.
playground filled with others who are also like not necessarily in a state of joy because it's so stressful, but there's this huge amount of like elation that comes from it's not just me. I'm not the only one. And when you look at somebody who's going by, who's like not just a consumer, who's business oriented in any way, they're like, I know what you're talking about. And there's like that sense of like shared camaraderie, which then turns into like a potential like collaboration, and you can go the business direction, business talk with that, or you can go the community talk with that. But it's growth, right? And it's
Yeah,
growth.
and it's excitement with team communication, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. No,
And the
yeah,
and
yeah.
the stuff that happened with Loving Vincent, like that was like a shot in the dark. I filled out kind of like an application, but it wasn't a real application. I sent an email to the who I thought was the director of the film, and I sent them my portfolio, and I sent them a follow up email and another follow up email, and then they responded a couple of like almost a month later, and they said we'd love to work with you. Come to Poland. I was like, okay, so I went to Poland, found out the interview took place in Poland. So I had to go through this ridiculous interview process
Wow.
when I was there, but it was a follow through. It was like, I'm here, now I'm here, now I'm here, now I'm here, now I'm here. And okay, now we're done. So there's finishing things is really important. Like if it's taxing you to such a degree that it's negatively affecting your health, your basic living situation, and you can't see any sort of way out. Like there's limits. Like I don't want to push workaholism on anybody, right?
Right,
But like
right.
I think it's important to finish things because and like try to create a basic trajectory for what you're doing and why you're doing it and what you want the outcome to be and what are signs that the outcome is happening. And then when you see those signs like a Hansel and Gretel way, then you're like, okay, this might be working. And if you don't see those signs, assess often, like, this is where we're at now. What do we want to do next? This is where we're at now. What are we going to do next? And that, again, it creates these really strong dopamine effects because you're working with other people who are doing really amazing things and you're seeing where they're trying to come from. Hey guys, there's some neighbors walking by with their
Cool.
things. So like there's I don't know, it sprawls like the process sprawls in different directions. Go ahead.
What led you to send that um email? How did you find out, and what led you to decide to take on that? And
Uh, Social media,
it
Facebook.
showed up, yeah, and you
So
were
one
like,
of
I'm
my
gonna try
friends,
it out.
yes, one of my friends sent me
Wow,
a
that's
direct
awesome.
message about it, and
Okay.
I went to the link that they provided, and I then did some research on Google, and I found the website for the production company. It was Breakthrough Films, and I found an email and I sent them the email again, who I thought was like the director, head over the film. And I sent them another email and then they responded back. People respond like they do. Like when you send them an inquiry and you ask questions that are very specific and in direct correlation with what they're doing, they're going to reply.
Hmm.
Because guess what
Hmm.
they're trying to do? Grow and expand. And they have no idea who you are. But the fact that you did your homework enough to be on point with your inquiry lining up with what their operations doing, they're going to respond. So that makes me think of stuff like manifestation, awareness, like if you want something, go for it, do the research. There's things like that make what you're saying makes me think about like subconscious programming, like different ways of thinking. If you're in a
Hmm.
fear-based way of thinking, guess who's not going to be ambitious and try stuff? Now, why would you be in a fear-based way of thinking? Who would teach you those kinds of things? I was talking about them earlier, right?
Right,
Be
right.
the unknown is dangerous, fear of the unknown, but we're all so similar. We're trying to get stuff done. We have deadlines, we have budgets, and we like working with those who are in alignment or in accord or who understand what we're talking about or going through so that things will be done better. And that's really powerful. And then capitalism took control of that and turned it into all sorts of a mess because it became about the bottom line, right? Instead of
Right.
community, instead of efficiency. But hey, there's a loud thing going by again.
Okay. From there, if you wanted to give information on how people can see your stuff on social media, if they want to be able to contact you to be able to help or donate or anything like that, you can do that as well.
Okay. So to start off, going from finishing up grad school to starting to teach, I finished grad school in 2014. After I finished, I started a publication because I was already hungry about going into community. So I started a publication called The Siren, and it was designed to interview as many artists and musicians and writers in my area as possible. And I turned that into a small nonprofit. And then I started distributing it in Boston and New York, Providence, and New Bedford. And I obsessed over learning about how to make that distribution more viable. And I went the grant route, which in hindsight, I wish I would have done an LLC with that. That might resurrect someday if if everything's in alignment. But in the process of doing that, I got hired on to the college that I work at now. Um, I didn't have to fill out an application for that job. They sought me out, which was very weird, very amazing. I feel very blessed that that happened. I was brought on to the drawing department. I found out that the head of that department, they went to the show that I had at UMass in 2014 for my thesis show. And they looked at the art that I had there. I was doing portraits. I was drawing portraits of men holding teacups at the time because I was obsessed with like, again, trying to find that balance of like masculine, feminine, like showing guys in their like just soft like side, but still showing masculinity. And so the chair of the department saw that show and they invited me to be a drawing professor at BCC. And then at the same time, the chair of the digital media department caught wind of the siren that I was running, and they invited me to be faculty member for the graphic design program. So I taught computer graphics, things like Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. And then so I was teaching digital media and fine art at the same time. And from the get go, I always thought the two needed to be
Wow.
connected because they need, like, artists need to understand how to see form, how to see shape, how to work with form and shape to put ideas together. That's the design aspect. And then how to like work with technology we have today to put concepts together and deliver them in ways they want them to be experienced, right? But I was still working with a slightly old technology now, which is printing. I mean, printing's amazing, but I would say now the way to go would be online publication. There's like websites out there like isuu.com that you can upload your publications to, and you can make interactive publications, which are a lot of fun to design. So I was both in the digital world and the fine art world, and I loved it. I felt like it was a dream come true because that's why I went to school, was to be a teacher. So I got the job like less than a year after graduating, and I was like immediately off to the races trying to figure out how to make the best curriculum. So I was working with other faculty, asking them their input on what kinds of curriculums they thought worked. Because the only thing I could think of was at the time craftsmanship, material understanding. The business part hadn't kicked in yet. I was still obsessing over how to teach like craftsmanship, digital media, and then making fine art students not afraid to learn digital media content, and making digital media students not afraid to learn how to draw so they could get their ideas out, by hand. So that was going on. That world was happening. I was doing a fiber art residency at the same time when all that started. And so there was a year where I was running the publication, doing the residency full time, and teaching like those classes. So my brain had a chance to really compare data. I like when I think one of the best things to do when you have a busy schedule is to compare data. It's like, this is happening over here on this end of things. This is happening on this end of things, and this is happening on this end of things. How do you tie all of this stuff together? And that's where the fun stuff happens. That's another reason why I love engaging with such variety of things at once, because you see these hybrid answers and solutions that just start to show themselves. It's like sifting. So I was in that process. And then 2015, 2016 starts to roll around. Loving Vincent project starts to announce itself. My friend shows me a link to it. I think this was late 2015. And so late 2015 ends, 2016 comes around. I send them the emails, I send them the portfolio material. I'm like digitally banging on their door saying, I'd really love to be a part of this project. I basically put together painting animation for my like graduate thesis, that which is another story. The school told me to not do that because that's not painting, but that's like another like story to tell sometime. So I had the portfolio material that matched what the film was doing. And the timing to work on the film was very serendipitous. They got back to me inviting me to go to Poland at the end of the semester. So just as I was tying things up with my classes, this May starts to roll around. I get the email and they say, we need you out here right away if you want to work on this film. So the semester ends less than a week later. I'm out to Poland. And again, it's just like following
Wow.
through. It's just going through. Now, I want to tell people also, I don't have kids. The really big thing, like I have energy and time to do these things. To me, the equivalent of having kids is the people I engage with. I'm not their mother, obviously, but like I'm like a team member, I'm a colleague, where like I see kids as future adults, and I'm like every time I meet a kid and I'm like, what are you like? What are you interested in? What's your thing? And I love talking to them like adults, like asking them questions like,
Yeah.
what do you like about this? What about that? I love giving them space and time to respond. And you see their personalities immediately start to shine. And I'm like, this one's going to be interesting to watch from a
Yeah.
distance, you
Yeah.
know? So I've got that extra energy available because I don't have kids, right? I'm married. My husband and I, like,
Good.
we're dual income couple, and we have like a Venn diagram of how we operate, where I've got the world that I live in and he's got the world that he lives in, and we meet
That's
right in the middle.
awesome.
And I heavily encourage, like, people, you don't have to have kids, people. Like there's
Right.
so much out there. Like kids, like there's kid, like when you have a child, like that's a whole investment. Like that's a future adult who's going to be their own selves, and they're going to go
Mhm.
into the world and they're going to have their brain to help them figure out how to take whatever chaos they come into contact with and process it in a healthy way to do something productive for themselves. Like that's the role of parenting. They're not an extension of you. They're not a clone of you. They're not something to beat to take your anger out on the world with. They're a human in the making. And so, but I have all this energy because I don't have kids. People are like, how do you do it? I'm like, I don't have kids. It's that energy that's going elsewhere. So the Loving Vincent project happened. I was there in Poland for the summer of 2016, and then I came back and the fall semester started, and then I took on the next set of classes, and the film was released in 2017. It was really neat to go to the premiere in the US. It premiered in New York. So I went down to New York and went to the opening. It was so cool. I got to stand in front of the theater and talk to the audience
Amazing.
and tell them welcome to the film. And I got to sign autographs for the first time. That was very weird. I'm not
Yes.
an actor. I'm not an actor. I'm behind the scenes, but I was totally like, sign if you want the little signature. So that was really
Okay.
cool.
All right. But still, hold on. You you're not an actor, but okay, there were actors, but you painted each each frame in a scene. So
Yeah.
how many paintings was that, and what was the size?
They were 20 by 30 inches, and I painted around 100, 120. I don't remember. And that was like a drop in the bucket, right? That was only a few
Yeah.
seconds. And the main character that I was painting, his name's Jerome Flim. I think he goes by Bronn in the Game of Thrones series. And I got
Okay.
to see him when the premiere was happening. I got to go to the premiere. Mike and I, my husband, we went down to France and we got to see the premiere of the film when it hit the world theaters down there. And of course, all the actors and the directors were down there, like doing the whole like red carpet thing over there. That was really, really cool. But yeah, I was a drop in the bucket, like,
How many
which
how
is
many
crazy.
artists how many artists were on?
It's 100, it's either 140 or 120
Yeah.
animators.
Yeah. Okay. And so there were 140 who were doing the same thing that you did,
Yeah.
essentially covered the same amount of frames as yourself. So, and that's insane and incredible. Um, yeah. So and that you got to did you get to meet any of them at all? Any of the Because that's what I tell people is like I'm like they filmed a whole film and then they painted each frame of the film and that's what you're seeing. And
Yes.
it's like and it reminds me when I'm sitting watching reminds me of Scanner Darkly, even though none of it is like Scanner Darkly
Yeah.
whatsoever. And Scanner Darkly wasn't painted full paintings for each frame. So there's a large difference there. Not to discount Scanner Darkly because
Right, of course.
it has its relevance in our culture. And I love that film as well. However, yeah, that it was ultimately amazing to sit down and watch that animation occur and think to yourself the whole time. You can't help it, is like, this is literally frame by frame, you know. Or was it oil paintings or
There were oil paintings,
oil
and it
paintings?
was every other frame. So we animated on what are called twos. So we
Okay.
were working on 24 frames a second, not 30 frames. That would have been asinine. And we were animating every
Would
other
have been
frame.
insane.
So we were animating what's called working on twos. And so
Okay.
that meant that every time we made a painting of a frame, we would photograph it twice. And
Hmm.
then rather than painting the very next frame, we would paint two frames over. And so it
Okay.
has a tiny, tiny little bit of a flickering effect because it's not
Yeah.
painted on once, but at the same time, that cut the labor in half,
Yeah.
right? And it took them 7 years to make the film, Jason.
It's
Like, it still
incredible.
was like, they said it was the most extended, laborious way to make a film, but they're
Yeah.
very much about what I was talking about earlier. Finish it. Once you start, finish it. And I
Yeah.
have a lot of respect for them for finishing it, even though they were working on what we'd call a
Seriously.
shoestring budget. Like, I think it was only a couple million that went into that film.
Yeah.
It's either
Yeah.
2 million or 7 million, but still, it was like they didn't necessarily like they built the film in Poland and Greece, and so the dollar for Poland is called the zloty. And when I was over there, the zloty was worth a quarter of the US dollar equivalent. I don't know what it's worth now, but like if you're getting paid equivalent of like minimum wage over there, like let's say $12 an hour, 12 zlotys an hour, you're like getting
Hmm.
paid $3 an hour. So like
Oh
they
my
had
gosh.
oh yeah, they had and it wasn't, we weren't paid hourly, we were paid per frame. So they paid us per, and I don't remember how much they paid us, but like
Right.
they made you dedicate yourself to getting stuff done as opposed to hourly, which I think is very smart, very, very
Yeah.
smart.
Sure.
But at the same time, it was a shoestring budget.
Yeah. No, and to have them finish it the way they did, and with that budget and how they were working, I mean, it's a feat, like to reverse technology into, I mean, because painters, you know, in the Renaissance and all of, they were what we would consider like celebrity in a lot of ways. That, not that there's not celebrity, artists, there are in pop culture. However, it's still the a lot of painters back then were the equivalent of, some of the, big super mega stars that we have today that are doing film, actors
Yep.
and whatnot.
Yeah,
So
it's like the ones that got the commissions from certain like aspects of royalty, or like if it was in the Dutch society, the ones that got certain like family like portrait commissions, they became rock stars for being able to land those commissions.
right, 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 exactly. So, well, I think we are getting to the bottom of our time. You want to direct some people towards your
Sure.
information?
So you could, if you want to follow what I'm up to, the shenanigans that I'm up to, I'm on Instagram. It's Kat Knutson Art, KATKNUTSENART. It's all one word. There's also a band that I'm building. It's a big experiment called Long Swan. That came out of teaching too many classes, and I needed therapy, so I started a band. And we just released a song on Spotify called Drive, right? It's like have the drive in you, but it's a fun song. That has an Instagram called the underscore long underscore swan, because someone already taken long swan. And you could find that song on Drive on a Spotify. I have a website. It's catknutsonstudios.com. That has a calendar of all of the things that I'm up to. Recently, there's been a lot of the figurative art sessions that I'm trying to make available for the community. There's going to be other types of workshops that I'm going to be putting together that are more business focused, mostly for artists that are trying to figure out how to make their work more of a commodity that they can sell, or how to present themselves in a way for people to be able to purchase it. Most of the time, someone wants your work, but they don't know how to get access to it. And they're not going to go through the process of saying, hey, I want your work, how can I buy it over and over? They want the one click, or they want to
Right.
figure out how to have access to your work. And so it's talking to artists about that kind of stuff. Um, so those are the two easiest places to find me, on Instagram and on the website. I have a Facebook page, Kat Knutson, where I also post things, but not everybody does Facebook. I've got a TikTok that's Kat Knutson Art, and that's kind of more of a personal diary of like what's going on in the background as I'm doing all the different projects. I'll post things that are going on more in the social scene, and who the characters in my life that are big influencers to me. Like you were talking earlier about personal heroes. They're like the people around in my life. So I'll post stuff going on the TikTok channel a lot of times. I love what you said over the phone when we were talking 2 days ago, how like it's kind of our responsibility to put things out there because we have so much access to the internet and so much access to technology. So I
Hmm.
kind of use TikTok as a way to kind of like just document things that I find really significant that are happening around me, or things that people are doing that really inspire me. Most of it's community engaging stuff or business related development stuff, or like mindfulness, like developing yourself, like so that you can engage with the world more like effectively. That's what the TikTok content's mostly around. And that's it.
Okay. Well, thank you. That was fun. And it's wonderful to have you sit with me. I've been so excited about this interview, and um I'm excited for what's coming with the project that you're working on now. It's amazing. And yeah, you're such a powerhouse, and you've been and continue to be such an amazing influence for me. And I wanted to be able to share that with people. And so thank you again so much for sitting down with me. And hopefully we can definitely do this again in the future.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you for asking me to come on to your show. I think this is absolutely fantastic. I love the aesthetic that you're putting together. I love the glasses. I love the lighting. I love the fact that you're
Thanks.
doing this. And I can't say thank you enough. For those of you that don't know, Jason was the guy that gave me my first show, my first chance at putting myself out there. And you have no idea how much of a barrier smashing event that was, because you basically gave me the simple epiphany of like, just put your stuff out there, just put it out there, like just do it. And I can't thank you enough, because before, and I still have this mindset that I struggle with, but I struggled with it even more greatly. It was, your stuff's not good enough, you're not there yet, you're not there yet, wait until you're there. And so I can't thank you enough for being the one that pulled the trigger on this journey. You have no idea how much of a trigger you pulled. You gave me that show.
I was just doing what I do, and your art speaks for itself, and your tenacity and your will to continue. Um, it's like I would never ask anybody to be sick and at all. And I love that you shared about something that you didn't have control over, being a part of one of your bottoms as well, but rock bottom, because that a lot of people uh, either don't talk about things like that, or they don't add it into what would be a rock bottom conversation, which it very much is.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's been the experience for me as well. And it also, I believe, puts things into perspective when it comes to, sometimes there's things that happen that are completely out of your control. And so I'm so happy that you survived. And it really, you squeeze every moment, and it shows. And there's just nothing better than having somebody like that around. And I'm grateful to spend whatever moments that we get to spend together. So
Yeah. Me
yeah,
too.
thank
Yeah,
you.
and I'd
Yeah.
love, that's a great spot to walk away from. Like, life is short. Time is the gift we're all given. And anything that gets in the way of that, it's weirdly, I don't know if it's institutionally intentional or not, but you don't need permission to be yourself and work with people for what they're already good at, instead of like focusing on what their failures at. or what they're not good at. And we're
Yes.
not alone. You're not alone.
No.
You'd be surprised how much others want to play. When I say play, I mean build. And when I say build, I mean collaborate and come at it from different directions. But so many people are scared of like, I don't know, there's all sorts of things that get in our heads. And it's like life gets a lot easier when you put that stuff aside. And I don't want people to have to go through any sort of tragedy to find those bits of reality, that truth. But it's life is very, it's very much potentially like there's so much potential in it. And when you put the whole one step forward thing, one day at a time thing, you start to see a pattern. That's where follow through comes in, and like see things to the end as best as you can, and then look at others who are also doing that. You'll have all these high five moments, and then you'll have these like equivalent of cafe moments of like comparing notes, and then those lead to inspiration, which then you look back 5 years and you're like, holy shit, we did this and this, which means we could do this. And it does so much more than any sort of like commodified activity that you could do, like any sort of consumption based thing. It's so much more fulfilling than that. So I always encourage like others to like, what is it that you find joy in doing, and you don't need permission to go after that. And there's others around you that are going to want to find a similar pursuit, right? And they don't necessarily look like you, talk like you, come from the same background in any way, but you'd be surprised how much you have in common with them.
That's beautiful. So yeah, thank you again. Dropping eggs, dropping knowledge, and I appreciate it. So thank you again, and amazing, good times, and have a wonderful rest of your day. And do some high fives in the background there. Okay.
I
All right.
will. Thank you so
Okay.
much, Jason.
Tell those
All
guys
right.
I said, have a good rest of their day. All right.
I will. I will.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
All
All
right.
right. We'll see you again. Thank
All
you.
right.
Love.
Thank you so much. Much love, Jason.
Bye.
I'm just trying to document it. Manic skin, my brain to find 30,000 viruses. Hit that acid rain, hit rent my NTFS useless. And I'm at Bride's been reformatted. Lens of my document, personal tax information hold. Explorers cause errors and need to be I left broken hearted. I entered safe mode about 3 years ago. Never does he processes populate my test management. Fake the funk and take a dump on my network. Call me the administrative account holder. A cold general users. Bandwidth abuses tonight. Bring your 212 a crawl. Claim you know of no reason at all. The internet to be slow and unresponsive. My email works, but I can't get on the web. Better call Gates before you back up your Cezzy Blades. Platters, Riff-Five, drive dealers. Feels not meaning to ramble, but is there any way I can get Discovery Channel on my Windows Media Player? DR Red Hail, make me wanna hack all I see repost FTP for